What's up, everybody? It's your boy True Element 78 in the building with.
Your one and only reigning, defending Mondo Lucha Hall of Famer, the X-Man, Xavier Mustafa.
And I am the one who has embraced the dark side, the natural Chris Black.
And you are tuned into a very special edition of Saturday Night Slamcasters. This is the finale of our review of Viceland's Dark Side of the Ring series. And on this episode, will be discussing the Fabulous Moolah episode. For those of you who do not know, there has been a lot of controversy surrounding the Fabulous Moolah, and that was taking place before this episode was even aired. And that was surrounding the WWE not May Young Classic, Fabulous Moolah Battle Royale that they wanted to do for WrestleMania, where a lot of people look back into the Fabulous Moolah's past and discovered that she may not have been worthy, I guess, of having a over the top rope battle royal named after her due to allegations made by numerous trainees of hers throughout the years and even women within wrestling who she had not trained. So on today's episode, well, I'm not going to say on today's episode, but that is what this episode mainly covered was Fabulous Moolah like the matriarch of women's wrestling, and did she help it evolve or did she stagnate it? And was she a pimp or was she showing these women motherly love? So we'll kick things off with Chris Black on his thoughts on this episode of Dark Side of the Ring.
Man, this was something that I learned a lot about the Fabulous Moolah. Like, first of all, I guess the people with the controversy figured out that Moolah was not so fabulous as it turns out. Yeah, I learned a lot about. I had no idea. She pretty much ran and booked the entirety of women's wrestling at one point, and basically, if you wanted to get booked, you had to go through her. I didn't know that. My favorite person, however, in this documentary was Princess Victoria. Um, I'll get to. She had three statements that I had to rewind several times just to hear her say it again. Um, then you find out about the stuff going on between her and was it Wendy Richter for the WrestleMania match, and how they did the original screw job with the Spider Lady. I don't know. It's a very interesting episode. I learned probably the most out of all of them because, true, I didn't really know who Gino Hernandez was, but I knew who the Fabulous Moolah was, and to find out a lot of things that I never knew before, it was an interesting episode.
Xavier Mustafa, what were your thoughts on the episode?
I thought it was a good episode. Learned a lot of stuff that I did not know about Moolah. And then, ironically, after I watched this episode, it was um, an episode of Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard that they actually did an episode on the Fabulous Moolah, so I got to learn even more about her. But she's a fascinating character to say the least. You have to give credit where credit is due. She was probably one of the people who, as far as the women goes, very influential in women's wrestling and a big part of women's wrestling. So yeah, so I think she was worth an episode.
So a little bit of background. They discussed Fabulous Moolah started training at 15 years old. She she was one of the first women. Well, yeah, she was one of the first women to wrestle inside Madison Square Garden because wrestling had been banned prior to that. And she also, not only did she start wrestling at 15 years old, she also ended up getting pregnant as a teen. They had Jim Cornette was featured in this episode heavily, and he was speaking about how Mildred Burke, before Fabulous Moolah, she had been the premier woman wrestler within wrestling. And then when the Fabulous Moolah came along, she, as Chris Black alluded to, she pretty much came in, took over wrestling, and she ended up being the booker for all these women and also training the majority of the women. And her style of wrestling was described by a lot of the women as the hair pulling and rolling around style of wrestling, not the very hard hitting style of wrestling. And then around the 80s, it started to kind of shift and different things like that. And Fabulous Moolah didn't like the fact that she was starting to lose her position within women's wrestling. And especially in this episode, Wendy Richter was basically saying that this women's evolution that you see now in WWE and professional wrestling, and that's being pushed, could have started way back in the 80s, but you had this person who started wrestling back in the 50s and the 60s still wanting to hold down the younger women and keep herself on the top. One of the big moments of this was when Wendy Richter had a match. I believe it was in Madison Square Garden as well for the WWE, where Wendy Richter had won the women's championship from the Fabulous Moolah. And then she went into this feud with someone named the Spider Lady, and Wendy Richter described that she had wrestled the Spider Lady numerous times and there had never been any issues. And then on this one particular occasion, the Spider Lady came out. She said something seemed kind of off, but she had no idea who was under the mask. And she ended up getting pinned, shoot style, as they say. So she ended up getting pinned for real, held down and pinned, and losing her championship. Well, actually, she got held down and pinned, but she was actually stronger than whoever was playing the Spider Lady this night, that we find out was the Fabulous Moolah, and kicked out, and the referee still counted the 3 count and took the belt off of her. And then she started wailing off on the Fabulous Moolah and taking her mask off and finding out that it was the Fabulous Moolah. Now, I do want to address this. Is there anybody that you could say that you probably wrestled, let's say 10 times, that they could go under a mask and you wouldn't know who you were wrestling at a certain point?
No. I think I would know right away. If you wrestled someone enough times, you pretty much pick up their style. Everyone has their own unique style. Every worker has their own style. It'll be easy to pick up who's who under a mask if you recognize the wrestling style.
Yeah, everybody has their own like different mannerisms and things they like to do and stuff like that. Like, yeah, you can point that out really fast.
So I didn't really buy her when she was like, I didn't know who was under the. I couldn't tell if she was working people still all these years later. That, you know, I really didn't know that was Fabulous Moolah underneath the Spider Lady mask, and I was really pissed off, and I walked away from the industry.
One of Princess Victoria's quotes, she was the one who was like, it was obvious who was under that mask. Everyone in the arena could tell who was under that mask. But talk about protecting your spot. Like, she went to the lengths of even, I forgot which opponent said, but like even hurting her. Like, she put her in a Boston Crab, and she said she leaned all the way back, and you could hear her back basically snapping. Like, that's brutal.
Ruthless. She was the first MMA fighter.
Like, working her is just like, you have to be prepared to shoot. I mean, she was that protective of her spot. She wanted to be the top lady. It was more shoot than work probably back then.
Right. And so now let's get into a little bit more of the allegations against the Fabulous Moolah. There were allegations, like we said, she trained all of the women, and not only did she train them, she pretty much treated her home as a boot camp where the women would travel there. She had set up pretty much a dormitory and would have the women come down and take bumps and practice their craft on mattresses or in a ring or whatever it was that she may have had down there. They had to be in at a certain time or be locked out. Then there were allegations that not even allegations, they said that she was charging people $300 a month to train them, and then taking 25% of their booking fees as well, of whatever it was she was telling them that they were making, because none of the workers were getting their money directly paid to them. It was all being funneled through the Fabulous Moolah and her husband. And then on top of all that, there were allegations that these women would be pimped out to promoters and have to do favors and services for people, where Princess Victoria actually said that there was she had broke her neck in a match, and so she was unable to wrestle. And so I believe, I can't remember where it was, but it was somewhere across the globe pretty much, that Fabulous Moolah had a connection where she was going to send the girl over there. She's like, the nicer you are to him, the nicer he'll be to you. basically saying,
You need a
"Hey,
payday.
yeah, you need to sleep with this guy because you can't wrestle right now, and rent's due, motherfucker." And so the girl goes over there to try to do the show or whatever, like basically being naive or just plain old stupid.
No, she told dude off the bat, look, separate hotel
Yeah,
room.
so
She knew what the business
oh yeah,
was.
that's right. Yeah, she did tell him separate hotel rooms, and then she woke up and the guy was like standing over her or whatever, and she fought him off. And then when she returned back to the States, Fabulous Moolah was pissed. It's like, I can't believe you didn't sleep with that man, and kicked her
Quote
out.
quote number two from Princess Victoria. She said this man was not only beat by the ugly stick, he got beat by the whole damn forest. But you know what? Outside, let's totally ignore the whole um, pimping them out to promoters for favors, quote unquote. She basically used a brothel's formula. I mean, without the sex involved. She had her girls, her set of girls on her ranch or whatever. They went out and they wrestled. They came back and she got a cut of their money. She basically was pimping them. She was the madam, basically, without the sex. Now add into the sex, and now she was a true madam.
I ain't gonna lie, when I see Fabulous Moolah, I see pimp. As soon as I heard these allegations, I said she is guilty as charged.
She been pimping since been pimping since been pimping.
And
Plus,
pretty much this all started from the initial allegation was by Sweet Georgia Brown's family, who it was a quote in here where her sister even said to her, it was like, every time you go out on the road to one of these wrestling shows to wrestle with Moolah, you come back pregnant. Like, all of her kids are mixed. She was actually the first female professional black wrestler from South Carolina, I believe, or from, I'll just say the Carolinas. And all of her kids are mixed. None of them know their dad, and it was just a very strange story. And then the guy in there who had the fight for Moolah, advocate Nigel Sherrod, who was featured in the documentary with Mary Austin, who was the Fabulous Moolah's daughter, basically saying that you guys are ruining Moolah's legacy, or trying to ruin her legacy for everything that she did in professional wrestling. She deserves to be honored. What were you guys' thoughts on that, on those two dynamics?
Okay, so this is where there's an extreme black mark or blemish on professional wrestling. The whole, just, I can only imagine what it was like being a woman in the business back then. I mean, it's probably, from what I hear, pretty rough being a woman in the business now, with the creeper promoters and, them always trying to get favors from you and blah, blah, whatever. Imagine what it was back then where, women didn't have as many rights. Um, they were just starting out. It was mostly primarily a man's business, a man's world. If you wanted to get into this man's world, you had to play ball. I don't blame Moolah for just trying to navigate her way through the business, and she was almost like the abused becomes the abuser. She's probably was so used so much by the men of the wrestling business that she was just like, fuck it, I want my cut too. I don't want to say that, I'm not justifying it in any way, but she was doing what she needed to do to survive in the business, or what she felt she needed to do to survive in the business.
I think that I think she didn't want anybody to take her spot, so she wanted to make sure she controlled as much as everything as she could to keep her spot. And I think too, to a certain extent, like they said that, like, she would go out of her way to protect these girls too, if they were with like a creepy promoter or something like that. So, like, I don't think everything she really did had bad intentions to it, but there was definitely some selfishness going on and some pimping.
Yeah, one of the very interesting parts is we just mentioned the whole Princess Victoria situation, where she was basically it basically had been alluded to her by Moolah and by the guy on the phone what the intentions were for her coming out there. She made her own intentions known of what was not going to happen when she got out there, and those original intentions that were stated by the John or whatever you want to call them were attempted and thwarted or whatever the case may be. But that was that one particular case. And it was just kind of funny because funny might not be the proper word in this PC culture, but it's the word that I'm just going to use right here. That despite the attempt of Moolah to pimp out Princess Victoria, she defended her at the end of the documentary by saying, like I just said, she deserves to be honored for her contributions to professional wrestling. And if you call her a pimp, you're calling me a whore, and I'm not no whore, or whatever the case may be. But it's like, yeah, maybe you were able to defend yourself in that situation, but think of all of the girls who were put in that situation by the Fabulous Moolah or by her husband, who didn't have the power or the strength or even the mental willpower to overcome that situation and just gave in, like, this is what the industry is, this is what I have to do. And they were pimped out, whored out, whatever the case you want to call it. Even though you may not willfully went into that lifestyle, but that just became what it was. It became the norm for you because it was like, hey, this is how you get ahead in this time period. If you want to be on this, if you want to be booked on these shows, this is what you have to do. You had to become, you know, you had to play ball, like we said on earlier.
You know, speaking of Princess Victoria, it's just like one would probably ask, if this was what women had to go through to be part of this business, why would they remain in this business? And Princess Victoria sums it up. Every single wrestler, every worker can relate to this. Once you step into that ring, you are hooked.
I'm reminded of the words of a great philosopher by the name of Big Daddy Kane. And pimping ain't easy.
It's hard out here for a pimp.
So let me ask you guys, because this debate still goes on, even involving men. This debate goes on with people like Chris Benoit, controversial figures in professional wrestling. Do these allegations, whether they're unsubstantiated or substantiated, if they're proven or unproven or whatever case may be, but especially if they're proven, like we have evidence that at least attempts were made, but right now this woman is dead and she can't defend herself, so it's a bunch of people talking about what was done to them or what may have happened to them or whatever the case may be. Would you say that someone like that is still eligible to be revered and looked at it for their contributions to whatever industry they're in? Right now we're talking about professional wrestling, but
okay,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm gonna say that what happens outside of the ring shouldn't, and this is why. Because a lot of these situations, we don't have the full story. As much as people want to speculate or say, we don't know what truly happened in the Benoit home that night. We don't know, like Princess Victoria said, unless you were there, don't talk on it. Don't speak on it. Don't even give your opinion. We don't know what the true stories were. So we can't say, okay, this person isn't worthy because we weren't there. We weren't in the room. We weren't part of the deals. We don't know what went on. We're only getting secondhand knowledge. So I really don't think, unless it is proven without a shadow of a doubt, these type of circumstances, you can't mark up, mar their legacy because of he said, she said, or just some allegations. If that were true, then we would have allowed, the Michael Jackson allegations to destroy his reputation, like his legacy. But for the most part, it hasn't. They're, without getting off topic, I'm just saying it's allegations.
R. Kelly been pissing on girls for years, and he just not getting in trouble for it. But one thing I'll say about this whole Fabulous Moolah thing is, I've never heard a peep of this until after she passed away. So it could just be some people hating on her. Like what do we know? What's fact and what's fiction? The difference between that and the Benoit situation is, Benoit was there with the blood on his hands. He did it, and he that's his wife and his defenseless kid. Where with Fabulous Moolah, if that was the case, I mean, these are grown ass women, so they have the choice to walk away. It wasn't like Moolah was. I mean, she did. They did go on record to say that she did give them hands from time to time, but it was mostly in the ring to make sure that they were worthy to be the whole women's championship. Like there's a story about her wrestling Sensational Sherry back in the day. And they said Moolah whooped her ass. And then got in the back and was like, listen, if you want to be champion, you got to work on your cardio because your cardio is trash. And she's like, oh, thank you. But anyway, these grown ass women, they can make their decisions. And like I said, did not come up with that after she died, so that's a little suspect. So yes, she deserves to get all her accolades because if somebody really had a problem with it, they should have said something a long time ago. Don't be bringing up stuff late.
Yeah, they can't defend themselves.
Well, who knows? They could have been bubbling up. You know how things go. The thing about when
Yeah, but
think that,
Fabulous Moolah was like 137 years
but
old though. They
you
could
also
have
got
brought that
you
up a
also got to
long
think
time
about
ago.
you also got to
Let's talk
think about
about
the
something more
times though.
recent.
You also got to think about the times, how information is dispersed now versus how it was dispersed back in.
But,
Those there may have been rumblings back then, but the internet was barely even a thing yet.
but let's talk about something more recent. Now, Jimmy Snuka, people knew for years that he threw that broad off the balcony. Everyone's been known that. But it wasn't until recently, before he died, charges were brought up. So this is nothing new in the business. People turn the other way, turn a blind eye or whatever to certain things, and then later on it comes out. So I'm not surprised about that. But like Mustafa said, it might be just some hateration going on, and we don't know. The thing is, we don't know. We weren't there back then. All we have are secondhand accounts.
Right, and I really can't like, you know, a lot of people say like a show like this wants to find the people who are going to say the most salacious things, and like I said, this is the finale of us reviewing their series. I would say that for the most part, Viceland series, they try to be as fair and balanced as they possibly could with the people that they discussed, whoever it was. Even when it came to the Fabulous Moolah, because like I said, they had people on there who was talking about how she wasn't shit, she mistreated people, she held people down, but at the end of it, they pretty much all said, "Hey, look, that was the business. That's what it was back then. She did what she needed to do to survive. She taught us how to survive, or at least how we thought we had to survive. It is what it is. Don't take away her legacy for mistakes that she made in the times that she lived in order to get to where she was." That's pretty much how you kind of sum up the entire Fabulous Moolah episode, in my opinion. What do you guys think about that?
I agree.
That people try to put a magnifying glass using today's standards or today's understanding with how things were back then. And yeah, things were fucked up. They shouldn't have been the way that they were. Once you know better, you do better. And we evolve as people and we evolve as a culture. But like you said,
Well,
she was the abused who became the abuser.
right. Yeah, this is just, to me, this is just another tragic story in the in, in the span of professional wrestling. Um, as much glitz and glamour this business has, it also has quite a bit of dirt on it. And series like this is exposing a little bit of the dirt. But like you said, we're looking at it from today's standards. Um, I don't know, like you can look back to the back in the days when we were kids. Things have changed. Like grade school nowadays, totally different than when we grew up.
Oh yeah, y'all can
Totally
get
different.
paddled.
Yeah, I mean, so people need to realize that times change, and sometimes the standards back then weren't the same as they are now, like you were saying. So, yeah, it's an interesting tale. All I have to say is, damn, women had it rough in the business.
Any wild stories of things you've heard recently in the business that made you go, "Wow, I can't believe that promoter did that or that person did that to get that spot," that you want to share?
No
Recently,
comment.
recently, no, except for well, I'm not gonna name no names, but Mustafa will know exactly what I'm talking about. Like I've heard rumblings of someone who likes to pay his talent while they're in the shower. But I guess I can't say here or there because I've never experienced it, so it's just hearsay, quote unquote.
He's saying that now
saying,
until 10 years from now. He's sitting on a documentary talking about there was one time he came into the shower to pay me.
No, I heard a couple of stories about some guys getting on their knees and praying.
I mean, you talk to some of the female talent, they'll complain all the time. So, oh yeah, there's normally creepy promoters that are trying to always try to, get you to come back to their house, hotel, whatever. I mean, I don't know, it's almost to be expected. That's horrible to say, but it's almost to be expected because a lot of people are kind of creepy. Shit, so.
Right. And sometimes it ain't even creepy just for sex. It's just creepy because they're unaware of themselves, too.
Yeah, they're just not self-aware that they're creepy.
Yeah, so. Anything else you guys want to say about this episode of Dark Side of the Ring? I think that we've touched on the main points of it. I hope everybody out there has enjoyed this series so far. But like I said, you guys got anything else you want to say?
Overall, I've enjoyed this series. And if there's anything that I've learned from the Fabulous Moolah and her episode, that you got to make sure you keep your pimp hand strong, baby.
This is definitely like a bittersweet episode because I'm so looking forward to the next season, but I kind of feel like expectations will be higher. So I don't know if they're going to be able to, rise up to the expectations, but they've got more than enough stories to have this series go on for a very long time. I can think of probably a dozen episodes that I would love to see.
Heard there might actually be a Chris Black episode.
Hey. Don't nobody got no dirt like that.
Black Side of the Ring. But other than that, I want to thank everybody out there for listening to this special edition of Saturday Night Slamcasters. This has been our review, or should I say overview, of the Viceland Dark Side of the Ring. You guys want to give out your social medias to everybody?
You can catch me at Xavier Mustafa on Facebook and Twitter. You can also follow Legacy Pro Wrestling at Legacy Pro Wrestling WI on Facebook and on Twitter. And we're on Instagram too. Forgot about that one.
You can catch me on Twitter at _natural_CB and at the Natural Chris Black on Facebook and Instagram.
And like I said, if this is the first episode of our overview of Dark Side of the Ring that you're tuned into or listening to, be sure to go back and check out the other 5 episodes. Also, we have a playlist listed on our homepage, so be sure to just check us out. Also, be sure to check out our podcast. We upload a new podcast every second and fourth Saturday out of the month. So be sure to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast from. Thank you for joining us. We will holler at you guys. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that bell so you don't miss any of our uploads and you get all of the notifications. We up out of here. Holla at your boys. Peace. Come get slammed.